Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's nice to be back in church. I grew up on a Christian commune in the hippie days. My parents were hippies. And so my birth name is Psalm, Isadora, like in the Bible. And I grew up there, but I spent a long time broken up with church. I spent a while really angry, I think, at the church, and also upset with God for all the suffering I saw in the world. And also I had a hard time with the way God was sometimes represented in church with some of the dogmas. So it's good to be back in church. And in between in all those years, I did a lot of searching. So now that I'm back in church, I have some things I want to share with church. Most recently, I was in India. So I just came back from a trip to Calcutta, and I have a nonprofit. I do work with sex trafficking and women who are sex workers in Calcutta, and teaching them yoga and some of the practices of Kundalini activation, and teaching them that with the belief that if people are activated and empowered with that energy, that they'll be able to begin to manifest the life closer to their own dreams, closer to their own truth, and not with an idea of what their life needs to look like from the outside, but that if people have enough energy, they'll be able to grow into and become that thing that their soul came to the earth to be. And I feel like the more I travel and teach, the more often I realize I'm just talking to people about, how awake is your soul in your world life. One of the places I traveled and studied was Istanbul, and I had a Sufi teacher. And he used to say to me that we have the soul life and the world life. And he would say, remember who is looking through your eyes in this body, which is a sheath or a vehicle for my soul to get to experience the world. That often we forget that that's what we're here for, and that we're here to create something expressive with our lives. That's why we took this journey. And I feel one of the reasons I broke up with church and God for a while was I felt like, in this world that is challenging, that there is suffering as well as joy. One of the explanations for that was to disassociate or run away from the world, with the idea that heaven is somewhere else, and don't focus your attention or your desire on this world. Put your energy into the next life. And that never really made sense to me, because it seemed to me that if we believe in God, and God gave us these bodies, or we chose these bodies, that it would be disrespectful not to fully enjoy them. That it was sort of the opposite. In church they're saying it's disrespectful to enjoy the world. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be disrespectful not to enjoy the world? That any God that I could really love would encourage loving the body and the world and each other in that way. So I used to say it's sort of like I have a son who's 18 now, but when he was like 12 and 14 especially, like nothing was good enough. So anywhere I drive him, anywhere I take him, it wasn't quite, it wasn't that good. And I just think, wow, it's like a constant state of not enjoying yourself. And then being the parent, you're like, well, then can I get you this? Can I do that for you? The fickleness, right? And I thought, that's sort of the human experience with God. And they're sort of like, God's like, how about this? How about a waterfall? Right? And that we don't just enjoy what we have been given and the world that is created. And instead we keep saying, it must be somewhere else. Think about heaven. Think about somewhere else, because we don't like some of the things we have to deal with here. And I do think that it is very important to address, though, the suffering in the world that we do see when we look around. Why is there suffering? Why do some people have it a lot harder? I think within all of us, we have a little bit of that, to different degrees, wounding or suffering, of what it is just to be a human and walk the soul life and the world life full. But, coming from Calcutta, where I just was in the red light district in one of the, most poverty-stricken areas in the world, when those people leave the room, they're going back into, that's a real living hell. And when we leave this room today, most of us are going to get lunch. And that's okay too, that's great. A lot of people I talk to say we are in the celebration, be enjoy more. And we can be enjoy more, but part of us, I think, won't really be able to fully be in that joy until we know that we're lifting other people up. That when we look at the table of celebration, we say, who's here, who's not here, how do we bring everybody to that table of celebration and joy? And that's not always easy, because I think we're already tired and overwhelmed just by everyday life, right? And so how do we have enough energy to do that for ourselves and for other people? And so some of the things that I've studied, I said I've gone on a walkabout. And now I'm back in church. And I have some tools. I've been a lot of places. I looked really hard. And one of them is breathing exercises that awaken this energy. Has many names: Chi, Prana, Kundalini. It's the energy of sleeping potential, with the idea that most of us aren't working at our full potential. And even, they've done studies, maybe we're at 20% of our brain, maybe, on a good day. And so a lot of what feels really far out or supernatural is simply accessing more of what already is, of our own energy, of our own minds. And that in the world of survival, we've kind of stopped believing in the magic. And in the world of survival, even when we pray, I feel like it's like, what did Jesus say? If we had the faith of a mustard seed, we could move a mountain. And I always think, well, what does that mean? We don't even have the faith the size of a mustard seed most of the time. And think about the size of a mustard seed. It's really small. So do we even believe in the things we're praying for really being able to happen? Or is prayer becoming a habit? Right? And what is the energy that fuels your prayer? So is it just the idea of words, or is there energy? And so this energy, Kundalini or Shakti, is life force. Life force created the world. So when we can tap into that energy, we can begin to use that in our lives. That's the energy that creates things. So what is prayer or transformation? Is creation or recreation. So how do we have and engage with more of that energy? And so there's real practices that help us do that, to be in more enjoyment of our own lives, and also to be able to lift other people up. And if we talk about the Kundalini, is represented as a serpent, right? And so in the serpent, it's called today's talk, the golden serpent and the forbidden fruit. And in my travels and study of it, in the Old Testament, there's the story that Eve eats the apple, and that's the problem, right? That's where everything got screwed up in the very beginning. And whose fault is it? It's a woman's fault. It's always a woman's fault. That's part of why I broke up with church and the God that I was taught. It's like, I'm tired of everything being our fault. And then when I traveled to India, I found God the Mother, right? And so you go, is it God with a vagina? Is the idea that that is the creatrix, the womb that creates everything, but that we've become so divorced. Everything's an idea outside of our human experience. God must be somewhere outside our human experience. And when I found God as the mother, it has a lot to do with the human experience, right? And with our bodies truly being the temple. And these are easy things to say, but it's a whole other thing to really begin to reclaim the holiness of our body. I give a lot of talks to women and do women's empowerment, and a lot of us just don't even, a lot of women aren't feeling their bodies, because we've been taught that the body is a distraction from God. It's actually a really big thing to reclaim, that the body is not a distraction from God. The body is the vehicle to experience God. This is another thing my CP teacher said. He said, how did we all come into being? How did we get here today? He said there was a time when it was just one. There was just infinite space and oneness. And oneness woke up one morning, like you wake up in the morning, and you go brush your teeth, right? You see yourself in the mirror, and some part of you, that's your spirit, is like, oh wow, look at my bodysuit today. Right? Like, you may not even be aware, but some part of your spirit's like, oh cool, this is what I look like in this incarnation, right? And that the oneness woke up one morning and said, I want to see myself, right? And created the mirror of the world. So that the whole world is a mirror of God to experience God. So without these bodies, God can't touch, taste, and feel and see. And so to begin to view our lives and our bodies not as a distraction from God, but as God, experiencing God. And I truly believe that if we were able to reclaim some of that, we might have a little less suffering in the world. Because when we're disconnected from our bodies, then we're disconnected from the body of the earth, and then we kind of treat it like it's disposable. Our bodies are disposable. They're here to get, just think about heaven. This is disposable. And when we do that, we create a lot of harming and violence in ourselves. You have to think about how thinking that way would affect the choices of how you live your life. Right? And the same thing in the body of the earth. If we act as if the body of the earth is disposable, which is how we're living a lot of the time now, how does that affect the choices we make and how we treat the body of the earth, which is the mother too. So I really feel like it's time to reintegrate the physical and the spiritual. Right? That's a really important time that we're living in right now. We talk about the rising energy of the sacred mother. That we've spent a long time in a more patriarchal relationship with God. And patriarchy doesn't mean a man's body and a woman's body. It's a way we've all lived for a while now. And I grew up in America where all the versions of God were men. And again, you have to think about if all you've really thought or seen that God is a man, that's going to affect a lot of your choices without even knowing it. These become our filters. Right? And so it's very interesting when, growing up, if I saw a depiction of God as a woman, it was like, well, that's the devil. Right? Because that's not Christianity. And anything outside of Christianity was sort of demonic. So very interesting that then depictions of a female God were demonized. Right? And the same thing, we go back to the story of the Garden of Eden. It was demonized. The woman made the mistake. She ate the apple, and now we're all screwed. Why do we live with suffering? Eve. She did it. Right? I always take it as her fault. The woman did it, and then the serpent, right? So who tempted her was a serpent. And serpent energy in all cultures, I travel all around the world, is always feminine. The energy of the serpent, which is the energy of Kundalini. Right? And what is serpent energy? Is the energy of transmutation. A snake sheds its skin. So the energy of transmutation is the idea of being able to take poison and turn it into medicine. And the tantric turns it into gold. And I believe that that's that transformation of taking suffering, right, the poison in the world, and being able to transmute it as medicine with our own ability to forgive ourselves and to have more energy to help others, uplift others in the ways that we feel ourselves. And then that turns into the goal, which is compassion, right? And living a life of compassion for ourselves and other people with enough energy to transmute, right, the poison in the world into medicine, into gold. And so the serpent isn't the problem, right? The serpent energy is a very powerful energy to begin to learn how to work with. Right? And that's that energy sleeping dormant in the spine. They're saying what is Kundalini is described as a sleeping serpent coiled at the base of the spine. So what is that? It's in the body. Again, to reclaim this energy. Where is your sleeping potential? Where can you have more energy? How do you charge your battery? It's not here. So that's the thing, is most practices are coming at it from here. Right? It's in your body. So you do practices that awaken the energy in your body, and then they say the serpent begins to wake up, and then she uncoils herself and moves up through the spine. If you're familiar with some of like the different energy centers or chakras, moving from the lower centers, the sexual energy, which is creative energy. Right? And even sexual energy has been so demonized in our world. Without sexual energy, there's no recreation. So what is sexual energy? The energy to be able to create something. And we're very uncomfortable with sexual energy in the world. Even in the West, my guru in India, he said, oh, are people more open about sexual energy in America? And I said, yeah, but in a really go get drunk at a bar kind of way. Not in a really deep, sacred way. And part of that reclaiming of the feminine is reclaiming that sensual, sacred, sexual energy as being a big thing, as being the mother energy that recreates life. And that life is something we desire, and life is something we come back to again. even in a lot of